Fasten your seatbelts for the realest Eagles and Sixers YouTuber! One who plays no clickbait and gets to the point! The myth, the legend, Nicky Steves! Come to my channel, you know the deal. Yo, boy, always keeps things real. I'm simply statue think they slate, dropping unrealistic magic. 2K takes for the clip. Even though cats like that get views closer to the millie, never hear me preach, slip on to Philly. Before you watch the Eagles all the way through the early 22, authentic talk, forget what others do. Come to my channel, you know the deal. Yo, boy, always keeps things real. The 24/7, 365 way. Sports content for the reals that feel the day. Good morning, everyone. It is time, episode 13 of the 3-Point Blitz. It is Monday morning, 10 a.m., so you know what time it is. Let's get to it. Today, we were fresh off the heels of Game 2 of the NBA Finals, so you know that's what we're going to talk about. But we also have some NFL news to talk about. And that's going to start with the rant of the week. Now, first, before I get into the actual rant part itself, let's start off. Quick shout out to the Hardcore Sports Network for letting me do the stream there. You got the link to my channel. There in the description, in the chat. If you haven't sub up my channel yet, make sure you do so you don't miss out. And over here, we got the Hardcore Sports Network as well, always letting us do our thing. Now, without any further ado, let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into it. So this rant of the week is going to start off with the news about one Mr. Aaron Rodgers. We've been hearing about it. It had been rumored he was going to go to the Pittsburgh Steelers on a one-year deal. It had been, went through it with months. Rumors started in free agency, went through the draft. We were curious what they would do in the draft, depending on where they picked the QB and who they picked in the draft and what positions they picked would kind of give us an indication. After we saw the Steelers pass on Shedeur Sanders, one of the highly talented prospects, only to instead and get Will Howard from Ohio State, we were kind of like, all right, maybe they are going to go with Aaron Rodgers. Because Will Howard was a 6th-round pick, not exactly an elite prospect, not usually the type of guy you go and get in the 6th round. Usually the exception to that is, of course, the great Tom Brady. But usually 6th-round quarterbacks outside of Brady, usually you don't get any, you're never going to find your superstar quarterback in that round with that one exception. So we kind of had the idea that, okay, maybe they're going to go draft, maybe they're going to get Rodgers on a one-year deal. And sure enough, they did. And I've seen the reactions to it. You got the mix of those laughing at it, clowning them for making this pick, thinking, what are they doing? You're picking up Aaron Rodgers on a one-year deal. Have you learned from the past couple seasons? And then you got those indicating that this could work out in their favor in regards to, okay, well, Aaron Rodgers could be a mentor to Will Howard. He's here on a one-year deal. Will Howard can learn from Aaron Rodgers. And I've seen that. I saw yesterday. Before I started on, caught yesterday's Sunday morning show, particularly the beginning with James Franco, the Steelers fan on the show, pushing this suggestion out there. He also suggested that Mason Rudolph could be a mentor. So I get where both schools of thought are coming from. People think that he could be Rodgers could be a mentor. Now, on paper, Aaron Rodgers could be a great mentor for a young quarterback. One of the all-time great quarterbacks to ever do it. Easily a top 10 QB of all time. Super Bowl MVP. 5-time regular season MVP. That makes sense on paper. Future Hall of Famer. Great choice for a mentor on paper. But here's the reality of it. You look at Aaron Rodgers' behavior in recent years. What signs, based on Rodgers' recent attitude, indicates that he's going to be willing to be a mentor? Name me one sign. To me, I haven't seen one sign that Aaron Rodgers is actually going to embrace the role of a mentor. Even on paper, it seems like he could be a great mentor. I don't see him doing that. We know he's still got a sense of pride about him, thinking he's still great. And anytime something goes wrong, it's someone else's fault. And let's look back at last year with the Jets real quickly. We saw last year with the Jets, they put a decent core around him. You had Lazard, Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, Bryce Hall at running back, a solid defensive core. And what did they do with it? A 5-win season. And while Rodgers did have flash moments of brilliance, he wasn't the same Aaron Rodgers we saw at his peak, even with a solid team around him, not to mention numerous coaches were fired throughout the season because of it. So we're recently fresh off a power play escapade by Rodgers. At least, even if you don't want to say it was a power play, he certainly had a lot of influence on the decisions the Jets made. It didn't work out in their favor. And then you point to the Steelers. Well, you look at Russell Wilson with the Broncos versus the Steelers. And while it is true that Russell Wilson fared better in his 1 year in Pittsburgh than he did his 2 seasons with the Broncos, when it mattered most late in the season, starting with their game against us, the ship fell apart. And some of Russell's weaknesses got exposed. And then, so now you're bringing in Aaron Rodgers, who's older than Russell Wilson. Because Russell Wilson, despite the fact that he's taken a fall, was younger. Now you're bringing in older Aaron Rodgers in the same role, hoping for a different outcome. Sure, yeah, maybe Rodgers plays a little bit better, maybe. Maybe the team record's better. We know that by now. But how many times have we seen this drill with the Steelers? Where they either start off a season really hot and finish with 8 or 9 wins, or they just barely sneak in as a wild card on the verge of elimination. This has been the story of the Steelers for the past 6 or 7 years now. Come on. And then you're talking about Aaron Rodgers. Like I said, there's no signs he's going to be a mentor in this case. At this point, I feel like Mason Rudolph is going to be more of a mentor at this point. I mean, seriously. I mean, Will Howard's got a better shot at learning more from Mason Rudolph. If anything, Brett Favre is showing, hey, Chad, what is up? Thanks for stopping by. You're here at the right time. We're talking about your team and Mr. Aaron Rodgers. And feel free to chime in on the chat with your take. Let me know if you agree, disagree with anything I say about it. And in the long term for the Steelers, bringing in quarterbacks off a bad season somewhere else, trying to resurrect their career, like I said, in the case of Russell Wilson, what has that gotten them? Playoffs at best, opening round elimination? They did that in 2023 with Kenny Pickett, Mitchell Trubisky, for crying out loud, and Mason Rudolph as their trio of quarterbacks. And then they had a similar fate with Russell Wilson. And now Aaron Rodgers, who's older than them, coming off a disappointing season with the Jets, is going to come in. I don't see anything being any different for the Steelers. And Aaron Rodgers, you're talking about a guy who is now turning into, ironically, the one quarterback who gave him the cold shoulder when he was trying to learn the ropes in Green Bay, welfare queen Favre. Now Rodgers has turned to that stubborn old quarterback who hasn't really done anything significant since 2021. You remember, let's see, 2022 was a subpar year. 2023, he had a shot at making something happen, but then the injury happened, and then we'll never know. And there you go. Chad said it. And Chad agrees. Mason Rudolph will be a better mentor. Exactly. Because Aaron Rodgers at this point, like I said, he's more at the Brett Favre stage of his career, where he's now just there. He wants to start. He's still stubborn. He thinks he can be the guy. He doesn't want to give it up. And Rodgers is one step closer to being a political commentator than he is a starting quarterback. So I don't see how this is going to work out great in the long term. Now, I get you need a mentor for a Will Howard, but Jesus Christ, you could have just kept Russell Wilson for another season. If that were the case, that would have been the better option. I mean, you could have found him. Jesus Christ, you could have found numerous backup quarterbacks. You could have brought in Jameis Winston to be a backup mentor. You could have found numerous QBs. You could have brought in Flacco one-year deal. You could have found better choices for mentor than Rodgers. And the Steelers, it's just like they're so desperate to find that quarterback. But the problem is they're never in position to actually draft that long quarterback for the future. They've kind of boxed in a hole. They're stuck in the same spot as a result. They're being forced to get veteran quarterbacks like Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, who are going to keep them stuck in the same spot. I don't see this working out that well in the long term. It sounds great on paper, but in reality, I just don't see it living up to that hype. And before we move on to the NBA, there is some breaking news we got. Green Bay Packers defensive back Jair Alexander has been released. He's officially a free agent. He had been reluctant about his offer. He got offered 16.5 million, or was either that or a little bit under. He wasn't happy with it. He wasn't showing up to OTAs, and the Packers just decided to release him because they didn't want to deal with the headache of it. Granted, while he is your best defensive back, you don't want to deal with the headache of him not showing up. Because once you don't show up, after you've already made it clear you're not happy with your current situation, that's kind of the sign that, yeah, it's time to move on. And then we'll see what Jair Alexander does from here. Maybe teams like the Rams or the Steelers can make him an offer, but that remains to be determined. The release only just happened, so let's give it more time before we talk about it. But that's the end of that. Now we're going to switch gears to the main stories going on right now, and that is in the National Basketball Association, the NBA. We're fresh off game 2 last night, and they're at 1-1 each. One into the series. A lot of people, were thinking maybe the Thunder in 5, and that could still happen. But now that game 2's happened, I actually am kind of happy that we got the overreactions to game 1 out the way. Yes, I know I harp on people overreacting a lot, but it happens all the time. After game 1, immediately, some people, not all, but some people were jumping to the Pacers could win this series. They could win this series. And they very well still could. But this was only based on one game, on a narrow victory. Not to take away from the Pacers. However, you're talking about one game. You can't just make assumptions after one game. I mean, the Thunder are still ultimately the favorites to win this series. And last night in game 2 reiterated why that's the case. Now in game 1, we saw Tyrese Halliburton hit that buzzer beater, another buzzer beater. First he had one against the Bucks, then against the Knicks to send it to OT in game 1 at MSG, and then game 1 of the finals. Once the players anonymously voted Halliburton the most overrated player, which still makes no sense. He's been on a mission statement to prove them wrong. And even it was acknowledged on the countdown last night that Halliburton admitted, yeah, I feed off of it, which is certainly the case. In game 1, he did that. We also saw in game 1, SGA had a near 40-point performance, but also one of the biggest differences was outside of SGA having 38, you didn't really have anyone doing phenomenal. Dort had 15, Williams 17, Caruso 11. Those were some of your standout scorers outside of it. It was mainly game 1, the SGA show on offense. And ironically, the OKC Thunder outplayed them. They outplayed them throughout most of the game. They were getting more steals. They were hitting more free throws. But it was one big factor. The Pacers came back in the 4th. The Thunder took the wheel off the gas pedal. And one major statistic the Pacers outshot them in was 3-point shots made. Particularly Tyrese Halliburton sealing the deal. That was the one major factor, along with the Thunder going cold in the 4th quarter and the Pacers getting hot in game 1. So we got to also consider that they did, in the case of the Thunder, outplay them in game 1. But to be fair, Boston outplayed the Knicks for the most parts in game 1 and 2 of the Eastern Conference semifinals. The Knicks still won the series. But that's also its own series. That's not going to have an effect on the NBA Finals. But throughout game 1, the Thunder were in control most of it, but the Pacers came back when it mattered most. Then you go back to last night, game 2. We started off, I was in the chat on Mitch's stream of the game last night for the first half. And first quarter was a good first quarter. A lot of back and forth action. It was 26-20 at the end of the first. But then we went into the second. As we went closer to halftime, the Thunder started to take control of the game, and they didn't let their foot off the gas pedal. Now, here was one of the differences, notably on offense. You had SGA. Wait, SGA had 38 last night. I stand corrected. I said he had 38 in game one. That was no, wait. No, hold on a second. No, I was correct the first time. He had 38 in game one. Game two, SGA had 34. He didn't make as many points, but Jalen Williams had 19. Chet Holmgren had 15. Caruso had 20. And Aaron Wiggins had 18. So the Thunder were playing better as a team, scoring more points as a team, not just SGA doing all the work. While he still put in his weight, he led the way. That was a big factor there for him. That allowed them to score more points and ultimately pull away with the win, as well as getting more turnovers, because the Thunder did get more turnovers in both games 1 and 2, but also game 2, they played better offensively as a team. The team as a whole was contributing more, and that was also a key factor back in the 2019 finals with the Raptors. When those guys, Siakam, who ironically now on the Pacers, Kawhi, Kyle Lowry and company, they were hitting their shots together as a team in that finals. They ultimately got the victory. But nevertheless, though, hey, it was a nice. But nevertheless, though, the Thunder now have evened it up at 1 apiece. Now, I feel like going forward from here, the biggest keys are, we know the Thunder are ultimately going to play better defense. They're the better defensive team. That's just the way the series is going to work. But ultimately, the biggest key to them winning is you got to get at least, if you can get at least 2 players at 20 points or above and at least 2 or 3 players in double digits, that's the best way to beat the Pacers in this series for them. We saw that's what they did in game 2. Now, SGA, he still can ball out and dominate, but as we saw game 1, he had nearly 40 points, and the Pacers still got a narrow 1-point victory. So with that being there, the key for game going forward is the Thunder can just keep playing well as a team. They're unstoppable on offense, and they're the better defense. They got this series if they can do it that way. They got this. Now, for the Pacers, man, they got to find ways to stop these guys they got to find ways to limit their offensive efficiency. Now, maybe game 1 kind of got a little lucky there, but game 2, not so much. I mean, for the Thunder, the big key is offense. If they can just keep scoring points on offense, they can have this wrap. Now, granted, the Pacers did come back in game 1, but remember, that was 1 game. Based on the way this series has played out so far, I do think the Thunder are still the better team, and they'll ultimately find a way to win this finals. But we're going to have to wait and see what happens. We'll see where it goes from there. But yet, so far, though, I mean, game 1 was a really good game. Game 2, not as well. It was started off hot, but then it kind of got lopsided in the second half. So if you were like me, you didn't really see too much of the second half. You didn't really miss out a whole lot, because the Thunder just kept their foot on the gas pedal and they kept dominating. And SGA took less shots, but so far we'll see game 3 is going to be in Indiana. We'll see how that home court factor plays advantage for the Pacers, but I still got the Thunder winning this finals. I still do. Either 5, maybe 6 games that the Pacers can win a second, but I still ultimately got the OKC Thunder winning it and lifting their first championship post-Seattle and their first championship since the 70s. But we still got to wait and see what happens, though. Just giving you my prediction. But we're going to see. So far, though, love what I see from SGA in this series. And I think the Thunder, man, they're just the better all-around team from what we saw, obviously. And that's going to be the deciding factor when it's all over. But with that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. You guys can comment. Let me know. You guys feel free. Let me know how you feel about the series, whether you're catching it live or commenting on the replay. Feel free to do so. And that's all we're going to have for you today. This is going to be a shorter episode of the 3-Point Blitz, but hey, it's still an episode. So with that being said, guys, thanks for tuning in to episode 13 of the 3-Point Blitz. We'll be back next Monday, episode 14. So stay tuned for that one. being said, again, guys, thanks for your support. I greatly appreciate it. Whether you caught it for just a few minutes or you caught it live. David, thanks for stopping in. Appreciate it. Unfortunately, we're kind of near the end of the stream. This is shorter than usual, but if you want to go back and rewatch it, feel free to do so. But I appreciate you stopping by. If you haven't done so, make sure to drop a like. So with that being said, to David, Chad, Mitch, or anyone else that stopped by for episode 13 of the 3-Point Blitz, thanks for your support. It's always appreciated. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Until next time, it's your boy Nicky Stees signing off.